All right, so what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually the new Attorney General of this country, Mr. Reginald T. Amo SC. All right, and we're actually seeing that he has replaced Minister Faris Al-Rawi as the new Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. Now, what you're seeing here is Minister Kazim Hossain, who is now the new Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and we have Senator Nigel De Freitas, of course, who also replaced Mr. Avinash Singh in the Ministry of Agriculture as well. And we have Mrs. Camille Robinson-Regis. She is now the new Minister of Housing and Development, and Mrs. Penelope Beckles is now the new Planning and Development Minister. So we have a few reassignments. We're now seeing here Mr. Amo, who is taking the oath of office there. All right. And I think this would have been a previous clip on the Standing Finance Committee. And here we have the minister who resigned, Minister Clarence Rambarat, of course, who made room for Minister Kazim Hossain to come in. He would... All right, guys, so it's now about 18 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. I am Kimberly D'Souza in your company. And of course, today we are going to be continuing the conversation about the cabinet reshuffle, but more specifically, you know, what the removal of Mr. Faris Al-Rawi as the Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs means to the country and what impact that could even have on voters. So standing by to help us delve into this a little bit more deeply, I have Professor Ramesh Deosaran on the line. Of course, he's a political analyst, and we're going to jump right into the conversation. Professor, good morning and welcome to the Now Morning Show.
Good morning to you and your early risers.
I know you're an early riser as well.
That's right, that's right.
Now, right. Professor, let's just jump right in. I mean, I just wanted to get your thoughts first. I mean, what do you think about this cabinet reshuffle that was announced on Wednesday?
Well, it isn't so much a big reshuffle in terms of you have about 22 ministers and just about a couple of them have been renewed. The important emergence from this, however, is the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs position. And I think some people believe that it is a demotion for Mr. Al-Rawi. That might be one view, but there's another view in terms of political strategizing by the Prime Minister. In the first case, Mr. Reginald Amo is a distinguished Caribbean jurist, you would say, very experienced. So his appointment has lifted the bar, as it were, in terms of the cabinet. He has some short-term and long-term objectives that he should put on the table quite quickly. For example, this whole question about the Police Service Commission needs reform. The process of appointing a police commissioner also needs quick reform. So with his experience and his broad-mindedness in terms of the required legislation, I think he should do very well in that regard. There are long-term issues, of course, that he himself will have to consider on the table, but I don't see Mr. Al-Rawi's new appointment so much as a demotion, as a strategy for preparing for the next local government elections. That is also an option that I think is worthy of consideration because the PNM as a whole, I don't think they have really recovered from the Tobago election results 14-1. So there's some reconstruction going on, and I think Al-Rawi's new position might be very well one of them in terms of local government reforms required to have a more efficient regional cooperation delivery system, and also bringing all the outstanding reforms for years now on the table with respect to local government. And with
so, Professor Deosaran, let's see if we can back up a bit. So you're saying that that you know there is a focus or a thrust on local government reform, but do you think Minister Al-Rawi is the person to take it to Parliament and have this change done?
Well, he doesn't have experience at the regional cooperation local government level. He has the experience in terms of bringing legislation to Parliament, and I don't think he has been as successful as he would have liked to in that regard. So this is some guesswork here by Dr. Rowley, and we'll just have to see what happens. There are other issues involved in terms of moving Mr. Kazim Hussain to agriculture, lands and fisheries. He hasn't been a high-profile minister. I don't know how he will succeed in this very demanding ministry where agriculture is supposed to be used as a pivot for diversification. So that to me is an outstanding question. Of course, the issue with Mr. Clarence Rambarat is a very unfortunate one. He has been dealt a very unfortunate blow, having lost 2 elections and then being made a Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. I don't think he really enjoyed that position. So he himself might be very relieved as to what happened with his removal from the cabinet. But
now,
all in all, it is a shake-up. It is a shake-up within the cabinet to help build public confidence. I think there are still outstanding issues in terms of delivery. I mean, the roads are in a bad condition. Agriculture is far below the required rate. So there are still serious outstanding issues that the government will have to attend to.
Now, Professor Deosaran, of course, one of the things that the opposition would have put in the public domain is the fact that Mr. Armour holds dual citizenship. He was born in Dominica, but of course he is also a TNT citizen. Do you see this in any way affecting his performance now that he's taken office?
Well, there might be some conversation in the media with respect to this because, you know, we have an opposition, and the opposition now will take every opportunity to puncture holes in the government's performance and their appointments. But there have been cases before with respect to dual citizenship. I think Mr. Kadasomian Gypsy, Winston Peters was one, Mr. Chaitan was another one, and it looks as if Mr. Rambarat has dual citizenship. So if, in the case of Mr. Armour, I think the best thing to say is that if it goes to, let it go to court, but there have been precedents that will bring relief to his status now. So I wouldn't go too deeply into that until he makes a formal clarification, or if it goes to court, which I doubt it should go. But we'll wait and see what happens. But I think there is enough for him to stand on his own right now, in my view. I think he has worked in the Caribbean, and the question of citizenship should be properly cleared out, either by himself or the Prime Minister, as early as possible. Get that settled, and let's move on.
Yeah. Now, Professor Deosaran, you did mention some of the policies, right? Because, of course, with a cabinet reshuffle, you would think that the new ministers taking office will have some new policies that they want to implement. Knowing that the new AG, you know, he has a great bio behind him and he has the experience, what are some of the things you think he may be wanting to implement when he takes office?
Well, there are 2 related things here. One is that practicing law in the courts, as distinguished as you might be, and practicing politics in Parliament are 2 vastly different things. He will have to develop the acumen and the competence and the profile to push through the legislation and the reforms now required. I think he should attend to look at a review of what the legislations that Mr. Alwari has brought, some of them very unsuccessfully, the anti-gang legislation, the no-bill legislation, because it seems as if Mr. Alwari, with all good intentions, he went too deeply into the Constitution. There are too many legislations that he brought that required special majorities, and that produced unnecessary controversy between the government and the opposition. So Mr. Reginald Armour will have to rethink the best strategy to do to get through these proposals without disturbing the public comfort too much. And more precisely, he will need to initiate reforms to the Police Service Commission in both process and structure. We have been having too much bickering between the government and the opposition, and the public are unsettled about this whole issue. So it's time to review the Police Service Commission structure and the process for appointing a police commissioner. And I would suggest that Mr. Armour put this top priority in his agenda, because it is important, because right now we're still waiting advertisement for a police commissioner. We don't know how long this will take, and this is very unsettling. So he will have a critical role to play in tidying up and expediting this particular matter. There are long-term issues with respect to constitutional reform, but that will take us for 2 or 3 years down the road until the elections. But the whole legislative and political environment, these things are still unsettled, and he should bring some cooling, some direction with his background and experience. But I must also warn that being in Parliament is quite different from fighting a case in the courts.
Now, Professor Deosaran, as you mentioned, the election, we are supposed to be having a local government election coming up at the end of the year. Do you think the reshuffling was related to that in any way? I
would think so, because I don't think Dr. Rowley would be asleep with respect to the Tobago result, and he has to do some preparation from now. And I think that is one of the devices that he has used to reassign Mr. Alwari in that position. But I have some doubts at the ground level whether he's so versed with the ground level activities in terms of the regional corporation. Apart from the legislative reform, you see, you need some operational activities at the lower level. And the public is very dissatisfied with infrastructure, with the condition of traffic, transportation, and the roads. And that is where he, if he could, with his other ministers, he has to reach down there. And I am a little skeptical about his competence in that direction. Although he might be a quick learner, he's very articulate, he's bright. But as I said, practicing politics in this country is a far different thing from being a bright professional. So I think the public is very unsettled with traffic, transportation, the physical infrastructure of the country. So I think we have to wait and see. There should be more changes, I believe, before the end of the year. I would suggest to put a better profile, a more effective, convincing profile as towards not only local government elections, but to the next general elections. And don't forget the opposition is waiting there. I believe they have smelled blood already. But they'll be there waiting and watching to see what happens. So the Prime Minister has some serious challenges ahead of him. And I think he has taken the first initiative. But he needs to do a little bit more if the question is about the next local government election, and in particular the next general elections.
But Professor Deosaran, I mean, you keep mentioning that, Mr. Alwari, he doesn't have the experience, to manage the regional corporations. But at the end of the day, he is an MP. And so he would have had to be, in the work, in his constituency, doing the work and that kind of thing. So is that work, wouldn't it translate to what he's doing now as the Minister of Local Government?
Certainly, but then if you require 100% effort, remember he has been a very busy Attorney General. He has traveled. He has very important cases, as we know, cases involving the former Attorney General and some very high-profile people. Ramdeen involved, and he has been overseeing those cases, getting evidence, traveling very, very often. So those things would have taken him away from serving his constituency at the ground level as if he were just an ordinary MP. But I think serving his constituency with the San Fernando, the boardwalks and so on, those are specific projects. But he would have to learn fast. What he should do is to take a tour of the regional corporations, have in-depth consultations, and learn very quickly, and he can do it. So I am just prepared to wait and see. I do not doubt his potential, but in terms of what is required towards the next local government elections, it will take a lot of work and outreach and effort for him to be really prepared to lead the government charge in the next local government elections.
Now, Professor Deosaran, we have a few minutes before we wrap, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Do you think there will be any political fallout from these reassignments?
Well, the only possible fallout will be with the Attorney General position, and I think Alwari has tried to clear that up by giving a public declaration about how pleased he is to be in the new portfolio, local government and rural development. So he has tried to dampen any subsequent controversy or questioning about whether he is demoted because he didn't perform well. And then his close alliance with the former police commissioner, I don't think that went down too well with Dr. Rowley, because it seems as if there is some contradiction in that regard. If you want a specific reason for subsequent dissatisfaction with him, I think that is one possible reason. That is, he went one way with the former police commissioner, and Dr. Rowley went another way in terms of having no confidence in the previous police commissioner. Alwari obviously had a different view. So that would have been an important issue in Dr. Rowley's mind, as well as what we just said about the preparation for the local government elections. But that is politics. So we see how it plays out, and I think Alwari is sensible enough, bright enough to know he shouldn't stir any controversy around Dr. Rowley, given the delicate position in which Dr. Rowley now finds himself.
Right. Now, Professor Deosaran, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming and just sharing a little bit about, what this change can do. And of course, some of the things that Minister Al-Rawi will need to do. And of course, the big task ahead, of course, for the new Attorney General. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great one.
Thank you. Good morning.
And that was Professor Deosaran just talking about the reshuffling of the Attorney General. Now, you are on the Now Morning Show. We're going to be right back. Stay with us.